This is Talk It Out, the Women's Agenda podcast. Tune in for your weekly download on the latest news, trends and ideas affecting your career or your business. Here's your host, Angela Priestley.
Hello and welcome to the Women's Agenda podcast. Once again, I'm here in the studio with Tarla Lambert, our publisher on Women's Agenda. How are you, Tarla?
I'm very well. How are you?
I'm good, thank you. We are doing our second take because I previously called you Tarla Dent. Actually, I've got Georgie Dent in the studio, our contributing editor on Women's Agenda. And yes, we all work with each other and we do know each other's names. So
I'll take it.
How are you, Georgie?
Very well, thank you.
So today we are asking on the podcast if women can change the world, basically, which we kind of know that they can, but we want to ask in the context of what would happen more specifically if we did see more women in politics. So we are recording just a couple of days post the Wentworth by-election, in which independent Dr. Kerryn Phelps achieved a massive swing against the government in Malcolm Turnbull's former seat, which had been held by the Liberal Party since Federation. And I'm not willing to declare that she won, even though a lot of media and Anthony Green and various other people did, including ourselves on Saturday night, because given the postal votes, we've seen a bit more of a different story and we need a couple of days before we see some certainty. But by the time you're listening to this, we probably do have the result and it is likely that she will win. But I do want to talk about what that sort of victory, a victory from like that level of a swing from a female independent candidate, what it could do to inspire other women, and what it already has, as we've seen over the weekend with women like Jane Caro saying that she is really keen to run in Tony Abbott's very Liberal safe seat in Warringah. So will we see more women putting their hand up, and why are women putting their hand up? Why are women so fed up, and do they need to run as independents? So Georgie, I might start with you. You have written on this today. What's your thinking? Are we going to see more sort of female independent candidates in the coming months?
I hope that we are going to see that, and I'm quite optimistic that we will. I think that there's been a confluence of events, not just in Australian politics but more broadly, and I think the Lib spill, getting rid of Malcolm Turnbull, it then led to that conversation about sort of women disclosing the levels of bullying that they've been facing in Parliament. And from the conversations that I've been having with people that are sort of interested in running, that are supporting women running for office, they've all sort of said that there is an increasing willingness for women to actually get involved, an unwillingness to sort of sit back and think, hopefully change will come, because I just don't think that's going to happen. And I think when you consider the likely outcome, I mean, even if Kerryn Phelps isn't to win the seat of Wentworth, which I think she will, but even if she didn't, the swing that she has managed to achieve in getting as close as she has is really significant, because not that long ago it was unfathomable, inconceivable that Wentworth would not be held by a Liberal. Obviously, the ousting of Malcolm Turnbull sort of put that into contention. But I think that the fact that from a fairly quick start, it was a quick campaign, the fact that an independent who does admittedly have profile, but the fact that she was sort of able to get the traction that she did, and sort of really platform on campaign on a platform of returning decency, integrity and humanity to politics, which I think is something that all of us want. I don't think that's necessarily just a female issue, but I think that for whatever reason it is resonating with women that actually, do you know what, if we want our political system to look different, we might have to actually step up and do that.
Yeah. And I mean, also the bullying that came out, or the allegations of bullying, I guess, in the Liberal Party, also led us to have these conversations about how few women are actually in Parliament, in the Australian Parliament, those that are a majority on the Labor side. So Liberal does seem to have an issue, and we have seen some of the the projections look at, with certain swings against the Liberal Party, very likely swings against the Liberal Party at the next general election, they could really end up with just a handful of women holding those seats. Tarla, do you see, again, what happened over the weekend as an in for us to potentially see more women putting up their hand, potentially to run as independents, and are women already putting up their hands, they're just not getting pre-selected?
Yeah, I think Georgie's point is exactly right. Kind of fits into a bigger shift that we've seen now, following Me Too and following a whole host of women putting up their hands and calling time on gender inequality in every form. And I think this is kind of tying into that. And, you know, the Australian example is a really positive one. It does look like Kerryn Phelps will take that seat, and that is unprecedented, and it puts the Liberal Party in a very dire position. And, you know, it may not be everything, but I think in part it is the electorate saying this isn't good enough. The boys' club of the government is not good enough, and we need to do better, and we need to see more women at the top. And certainly, you know, Julie Bishop losing the foreign minister portfolio, you know, whether she stepped aside or whether she was forced out, Julia Banks leaving the Liberal Party. These are big, you know, events that have taken place and have also kind of added to that and added fuel to that fire. But I think it's about time, to be honest.
I think it's also interesting because obviously in the seat of Wentworth, it is a unique position in that there is a lot of local anger among voters at the way that, you know, their local member, the Prime Minister Malcolm Turnbull, was very, very popular in the area. And so I think part of the result is in response to that. But I also think you can't discount the fact that the forces that actually essentially moved Malcolm Turnbull out, sort of this push from the right, I think that is being represented around more broadly around Australia outside of Wentworth. And I think it's interesting that this result perhaps is a signal that, and I mean, maybe I'm too optimistic here, but that actually the majority of Australians do want a return of compassion. And I think I interviewed one of the board members today for Women for Election, Colleen McKinnon, and she sort of made the point that while in business the research is pretty well understood now, that what is the positive impact of having more women in senior leadership roles, what's the impact of having women on boards, global research really does indicate there are a number of really tangible positive impacts from having more women in Parliament and in politics. And those include things like fostering greater trust in democracy itself and working better across party lines so that more legislation gets through, being collaborative. And again, I'm always hesitant to sort of say we don't need women to be perfect. The women who run for politics don't need to be any more perfect than the men that have been there. But we also do know from the data and the research that when you have more women in politics, we're going to have positive outcomes. And I think that that's something to really hold on to now, because she said it's not just an issue, you know, of it being fair, that, you know, women, I mean, the fairness argument is strong. Women do make up 50% of the population, so it's not ridiculous to think that perhaps we should have 50% of the seats in Parliament. But the reality is the positive impact of that is well beyond the fairness argument. It's actually in the fact that we might have some more substantive political developments, which would be welcome.
Yeah, and I think the representative aspect of that is so much more important actually in politics than even it is in business.
Yeah.
Because it's so important to have the community represented, and it really shouldn't depend on your ability to have had that career in order to get there, in order to fight the party machines and the various battles that need to go on to make that happen. And on that point about, you know, the more positive outcomes internationally, we saw last week that Ethiopia appointed, the Prime Minister of Ethiopia appointed a cabinet that is 50% female, so 10 women, 10 men, very deliberately came out and said that's what we're doing, that's what's happening. He actually said that women are less corrupt than men. And also noted that was really important.
No way.
He did. Less corrupt than men. And also came out and said that it's essential that they have women involved in order to promote the peace process. And he had a diverse range of women involved as well, which he also noted as important. And it follows the example also in Rwanda, which is number one when it comes to the representation of women politically, women in Parliament, which has seen so much change in the last few years since they put up a quota, I think it was in 2003, that 30% of female legislators had to be 30% of parliamentarians had to be female, and they've surpassed that, and they're now at close to sort of over 65% female or something around that figure, which puts them in that number one spot. And I think all those countries that are in the top few of those representative lists do have some form of quota in place, and we've spoken a lot about quotas on this podcast. But
well, actually, that was one of the other things that Colleen McKinnon said when I spoke to her. You know, she was talking about the Liberal Party, for example, and its sort of lack of women among its ranks, and she sort of said, if you look around the world globally, whether it's in business or in government, there is nowhere in the world where gender equality has been achieved without an intervention or a mechanism to achieve that. And she said, so the idea that you could perhaps want more women but not actually put a system into place to achieve that is just You know, it's quite condescending to even have that argument suggested to you. And I mean, those examples make it very clear that without a very clear intention or a mechanism like a quota, these gender equal leadership groups wouldn't actually exist.
I wrote about this last week, and one of the points that I made in that Ethiopian example was they've specifically come out and said this is about trying to achieve peace. Things are a bit of a mess right now. We need to move forward. And kind of compared, you know, in the Canadian example a few years ago when the Prime Minister came out and appointed his 50% female cabinet, he came out and just said, you know, it's because it's 2015. You know, in other countries, obviously it is 2018. This should be happening. But in other cases, in other situations, it's also because it just needs to happen. And I think in Australia, one of the real obvious issues, and we've seen this come out with the Karen Phelps result, and it was coming out in some of the polling as well, of people in that electorate saying how much climate change mattered to them, that they were, you know, that it would have some sway, or if not all sway, on at least a portion of their vote. And yet I was just so disappointed to see that the government post that kind of came out and said, well, we're not changing our climate change policies. It is what it is. We don't actually have any proper policies on climate change. It is a dire situation, and it has to be fixed. And it's one of those things again. And I think seeing some of the comments from Jane Caro, who is, you know, looking so ready to give a real fight in Tony Abbott's electorate. And that's what she says. She's like, I've got to do this for my grandchildren. I've got to really be thinking about them. I can't stand the idea that we are ignoring this issue. Tarla, I wanted to ask you, going more representative than what we're seeing. I see someone like Jane Caro, and I think how amazing that maybe we'll get this cohort of women who have either older children or might have grandchildren, and at that point in their life they're like, I can throw everything at this now. Yeah. But at the same time, we need something more representative than that amongst women who might potentially run for politics. Do you see a run of younger women getting involved, or any ideas on how we can get more women? I've thrown this at you, and I can't actually think of any clear examples at the moment. But
I'm putting my hand up right now.
You heard it here first. For Warringah?
I don't want to run against Jane Caro. Look, I'd love to think that was the case. I certainly think that there's a higher degree of engagement among young people now, and you know, millennials have long been tarred with the brush that we're incredibly apathetic and we don't give a shit about what's going on in the world. It's so grossly untrue, and I think, you know, the systems at the moment are probably not set up or structured well for young people to kind of move up the ranks freely and easily. And I think that's something that we need to address. But yeah, I'd certainly like to think that a lot of young people are considering it, and I think it's important. I mean, at the moment, you know, going back to the Liberal Party, if we look at, you know, who's there, and even in the Labor Party as well, you know, the men that are there have been, you know, typically guys that have gone through the same schools, have gone through the same universities, you know, they're mostly white, and that's a problem. We're not getting a diversity in any form, you know. It's not even in the men that are there. We don't have a diversity of men that are there. So I think absolutely we need to kind of move towards that. And as you said, it goes back to just best practice. What's going to get the best results for the country and for the world? We know that greater diversity does do that. So it's important that we do move towards that. And also, I think your point before, Georgie, about, you know, I think the government is in a particularly fragile position at the moment because they have such a dominant conservative faction, which no longer resonates with the majority of Australia. And what we've learned is that even though people, or a lot of people, may still be maybe fiscally conservative, they're actually not socially conservative. And I think that's something that's being missed because, you know, the majority of Australians do want action on big social issues like climate change, like Manus and Nauru, like Indigenous policy. We want to see a big shift there, and that's still not happening. And it's not good enough. It's really not good enough for the majority of the country.
This This is a commercial break for Work It Out. We'll be back in a moment. But if you're interested in being a sponsor for Work It Out or Women's Agenda, just drop us a line and let us know. That's womensagenda.com.au.
I think it's interesting when you were, asking Tarla that question, because I think that some of the systemic barriers that we know that have kept women out of politics or have made it harder for women to progress in politics, I think a lot of those are still fairly severe for young people up and coming, whereas it's interesting to think about, and obviously there are only two examples, but women like Karen Phelps and Jane Caro, who have had really successful careers, they've had families, they're at the point now where they the wife drought situation is not such an issue for them, because we know that for younger women who are in the sort of they've got small children, for example, we know that because of the way childcare responsibilities are carried out and things like that, it is actually a legitimate problem. Whereas for someone like Jane Caro, she's obviously now, she does have grandchildren, and I know she's heavily involved with her family, but it's very different to her position 20 years ago when her own children were young. And I think obviously diversity needs to be bigger than just women in those positions. We need women that reflect the communities that they serve. But I think that it would be a really positive start if we could get a few really strong female role models in there who are at a point where they have nothing to lose. I think I wouldn't discount the toll that sort of public life might take on someone like Jane Caro or Karen Phelps, but I think potentially they can withstand it. Particularly if they feel that they are working towards a greater purpose, which I think potentially they could.
Yeah. I remember sharing a panel with Jane Caro, and I can't actually remember the exact quote, but she made the point something like that. It was like, I don't care anymore what people think, so I'm going to go out and just say what I like. And there's something so brave and so confident in her words. And you can see how you can get to that with experience, and the lived experience particularly. And I think also just seeing women who've raised children. Of course, it's not all about women who've raised children, but I just don't think we can discount that, because they've often had a lot of time and investment in the community. It's you do have to learn skills around negotiation, obviously, with that, but also skills around building new friendships and relationships and things that happen with the local school and other things that. I mean, I can only imagine what I'm going to come out of after 20 years doing that, because we're sort of just entering that stage now.
Well, you think about it. You think about the life experience that Tony Abbott has had versus Jane Caro. Now, they're of a similar age. They're of a similar sort of, both of them come from middle-class backgrounds, North Shore. Both of them are white. So there's certain things there that are equal. But you think he's had 3 children, but because he's been a Member of Parliament since 1994, I think it's probably fair to say that his sort of role as a father embedded in the community is less hands-on than Jane's was. If you've read her book, she was, she worked part-time when their kids were young. And you think about everything that she has experienced as a parent, as a child advocate in the system, and think about how the world works. It's very different, even though they come from ostensibly very similar backgrounds.
In saying that, Tony Abbott has been very involved in the local community in Warringah. That people outside of the area can often is very much involved. I'm getting a look.
When you say involved like that, are you just thinking about his budgie smugglers?
No, I just mean he's involved in the surf club. He's out there. He volunteers.
I just mean he's not necessarily doing the childcare pickup and the school drop-off and those sorts of things when you have touch points. I think, when you're taking the kids to the medical centre, all of those experiences.
Which is so, and those experiences should be so valued.
They're sort of your touch points in a lot of ways for how you as a citizen interact with our government and how government policies impact on you. And I think, again, I agree with you completely that I hate the idea that you have to be a parent or a mother to have certain perspectives. I don't think that's true. But I think you also can't discount the fact that as a parent you do have cause to interact with various government agencies and various government services in a way that other people don't.
Yeah. Can I just go back quickly to the young women in politics thing, because I agree with you. Like, I think extensive life experience is important, and we do need to see greater representation of mothers within Parliament as well. But I would say that at the moment, issues affecting young people aren't being adequately addressed in Parliament, and they can't be, and they won't be until there are more young people in Parliament, and that is important as well. There is a focus on a certain demographic and a certain milieu, and that's it. And, I really do think that we do need to see greater representation across the board.
Young people really are getting a really crappy deal at the moment.
And
look, okay, maybe here I'm clutching at straws, but I also wonder whether having a generation of older women who've got young adult children, perhaps they're going to be more in touch with some of. I mean, I don't think you can discount the value that we would have of having a younger population in Parliament. But I wonder whether...
I think there's an extra obstacle for young women, though, as well, in that we're not especially well respected in the sense that I guess like a greater emphasis and greater thought and consideration goes into people that are middle-aged. And when a young woman speaks, I think, there are specific barriers that they face in I guess, being heard and being recognised. And I think that's, I don't want to speak for everyone, but I think that is internalised in a different way. And even it's even different to how young men carry themselves and how they feel as well.
Well, see, it's interesting, isn't it? I wonder, how do you think it would have played out? It's difficult to see, say, a candidate, even a really strong candidate who was 25, running in the seat of Wentworth, whether they're male or female.
Yeah, she would have been
it would have
laughed
been
at.
difficult for them to have the credibility, I think, that someone like Karen was able to have because of her career. And, part of that is the fact that she's been... a doctor and a politician in various forms for a long time. Whereas a younger person doesn't have that.
But at the same
to fall back
time,
on.
younger people are more kind of in touch with things that are going on in the world. They're more in touch with, climate change and big social issues.
Well, they've got more to lose from that. So they've got more to lose where they could see themselves being even greatly further protected, further impacted in their lives. And also, I mean, I also think going back to the point about young women is that like a raw deal in the sense of, if you're trying to get ahead with your career at the moment as a young woman, it feels like even in, maybe like the decade since we were probably at that stage, Georgie, of trying to get ahead as a young woman, it just feels like you have to do so many unpaid internships. You're getting paid really crap money, especially with the shifts in penalty rates and things like that. You're paying off a bigger HECS debt. It just feels like there's so much.
We also know very clearly, because the latest data shows it very clearly, that women are facing sexual harassment in workplaces, which adds another sort of layer of complexity to their career path. And I think we know very clearly that that's an issue in politics. I mean, it's an issue in business, but I think you can't discount that. So I think we do need to very seriously consider what on earth could change that might make politics slightly more feasible and viable for
and how we can take
younger women.
Everyone seriously.
Yeah, exactly. So while we've been sitting here and you guys have been chatting, I had to look this up. So a bit of trivia about young MPs and senators in the Australian Parliament.
It's very quick of you.
I know,
Is
Wikipedia.
Natasha Stott-Despoja going to be the winner?
No, I mean, I can look her up separately, but I mean, she was in.
Was she 28?
Yeah, I think so. So you look that up as we go.
Okay.
But the current baby of the House, so baby of the House is a term used to describe the youngest person, is the MP Chris Cruther, who is 32. So, and the current senator, baby of the Senate, is Jordan Steele John. He's 23. So Wyatt Roy was the youngest. He was elected at 20, which that does seem so young now. But so Malcolm Fraser and Paul Keating were both elected at 25. So it's not so now the majority are very much in their 30s, I think, when first elected.
Well,
so
even older. Yeah, I mean, look at our
If you think about now
leaders.
what the median age would be, it would have to be up.
Oh, yeah.
It'd have to be up near 40.
Yeah.
So Natasha Stott-Despoja was
reckon higher.
appointed to the Senate at the age of 26, and she's still the youngest woman to have ever sat in the Parliament of Australia.
Okay.
So
We
which
might
is
need to come back to you
interesting.
on who is the current youngest woman. Like her name is on the tip of my tongue, and I believe she's.
I also
in her
thought
early
Senator
30s with
James
kids.
Patterson was quite young, but let me look him
Well,
up.
let's look him up, and because, like I say, my sources have just been me Googling this right now. But
does that mean that I can never beat Natasha then?
it's too late.
If you are past the age of 26, I'm afraid you can't.
Yeah, so we're looking for the next woman who's going to break these records, which would be great to see. And maybe even to get close to Wyatt Roy's record, or to even breaking his, which would, he did well. I think that it was probably, it was unexpected that he'd be out that soon, but got mentored by a lot of people along the way. So we need to see the same result for a young woman. So any final thoughts on politics? Otherwise, I'm going to get to our recommendations for the week.
No, I just feel some reason for hope currently.
Optimism.
I do have a sense of optimism that, I was really interested to see how Wentworth played out, because I thought that even with all of the various factors, I just thought it would probably that the Liberals would hold it, and perhaps they still will. But I think the fact that the swing was so dramatic, to me, really does suggest that there are a lot of people, even sort of rusted on traditional Conservative voters who want something different. And for me, that is a cause for optimism.
Any final thoughts, Tarla?
I concur. Yeah, I think the Wentworth by-election was a very interesting development in the history of politics.
Yeah, and it sets the stage for a very interesting, the government obviously having a hung parliament is not unusual. We've had plenty of those lately, and it doesn't mean that the government is going to fall apart completely, but it does mean that when the election is called, and it will happen at some point by next year, or during next year, by the end of next year it has to have happened, it's going to be very interesting to see how it plays out, because if a swing of nearly 20% was achieved in Wentworth, previously a margin of 10% I think is considered a safe seat. So you would have to say then that it's up.
It is up.
Plus, you heard it here first, hung parliaments, good for democracy. I love them.
Well, as long as
Bring
you
more of
get, as long as you don't get too many, crazy independents in there, which could not be so good for. Yeah. But anyway, to our recommendations. So something a little bit lighter, hoping if your recommendations are lighter. But Georgie, you were very excited about yours. You only came up with it about 2 minutes before we started. So what is it?
Look, mine is Lego. Okay, so
I hate Lego.
Okay.
It is the curse of my life. When I hear it tipping out of the box, I want to scream.
Okay, so this is the thing. I have felt that way previously, but my 8-year-old daughter, so that's our eldest child, this weekend, in Sydney, the weather was particularly patchy, and it was a weekend of solo parenting for the most part. And she just absolutely was consumed with these Lego projects. She loved it. And we all sort of got involved at different points, and I had forgotten how awesome it is, because it just is. It completely consumed her and entertained her. And we had to hide it obviously from the 2-year-old. No, they have always
Your
played it, but
weekends are very different to mine, Georgie.
Tala, I'd like you to respect your elders, please. Okay? Sometimes my weekends are more exciting than Lego. But, no, not new to Lego, but she just sort of found a couple that we hadn't done for ages, and she got completely engrossed. And I remember, I feel like we've got so many toys that the kids do not play with. And then I just saw this and I was like, Lego really is awesome.
Yeah, my 5-year-old gets engrossed in Lego, but my 2-year-old likes to go and destroy his creations.
Yes. Oh,
and last week I had the added, I was working from home, attempting to work from home last week with the kids there as well. I ended up at the play centre, which had some free Wi-Fi and used it there. But at one point, the 2-year-old got the big bucket of Lego and he tipped it down the stairs. Yeah, so you can imagine
that's
that
like
noise.
An added,
and they get in your feet, the Lego
irritation.
pain. So I'm not feeling your recommendation there.
Okay.
So Tarla.
Sorry, I'll try better for next week, guys.
Yeah, that wasn't good enough.
Okay.
What have you got?
Well, 2 or 3 weeks ago, I met Liam Moriarty at a Business Chicks event.
Clang.
And I love her so much. And I now have a signed copy. I may or may not have bought several signed copies for various family members of her latest novel, 9 Perfect Strangers. And she just gets better and better. Like, I've read every single one of her novels, and I honestly am so surprised, because you would think that creativity and that, her ability to just kind of tap into the human condition would really kind of dissolve over time, and it really hasn't. She's really good. So I would recommend everyone go out and buy this, but I suspect that most Australian women already have. So
I'm yet to buy it, so I will now, following that one. So
I'm tempted just to dislike your recommendation on the basis that you didn't like Lego, but I do actually really enjoy Leanne Moriarty books.
I do like Lego. I do.
I
also have a 5-year-old nephew who is pretty much obsessed with Lego. It's bordering on a problem.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Positive in my view.
So my recommendation actually comes from Christine Zwicker, who is one of our contributors. I caught up briefly with her in Melbourne last week, and she recommended The Marvellous Mrs. Maisel to me. I hadn't really heard about it. I'd sort of heard a podcast remotely about it in which one of the lead characters was being interviewed, but I sat down. I had a whole evening to myself. So I kind of got stuck in. I ended up watching it till about 1 o'clock in the morning. Binge watching. It is the greatest series. I'm so happy I discovered it.
What's it about?
So it's on Prime, so Amazon Prime, which I didn't have, so I downloaded that quickly. And I think I'm on a 30-day free trial or something, so you can get it for free for a period, and you can watch this pretty
really
quickly.
Binge watch.
No, I finished. So I'm done. And it's set in the 1950s. The most just beautiful, gorgeous looking. Everything is so beautiful to watch in it, and the characters are amazing, including the lead character, Mrs. Maisel, who plays this woman who's kind of finding herself. She's got young kids. She's married, but there's issues going on with the marriage, and she finds this talent for comedy. And so she's entering the live stand-up scene, and you just find yourself, you're just gunning for her career, which is so good. You're not really gunning for her in her relationships or anything like that, or you don't really care. It's like for her career. You really want to back that, and it is so fun. So highly recommend it. My only disappointment was last night. I'm so used to being years behind television shows that usually I have a good 5 seasons or so to watch, and I thought that season 2 would be ready for me, but it's not actually out yet. But season 1.
Well, I'll hold off for a while then.
Okay, no, well, that sounds good. I think I'm going to need to up my game on recommendations, so I'll include that one on my list.
Okay. Well, thank you, Georgie, once again, and thank you, Tarla.
Thank you.
Just a reminder that we publish every day on Women's Agenda, we're covering politics, business, leadership, career, lifestyle, and a lot more. We send just before lunch our newsletter, so if you haven't subscribed, please do. Go to our homepage, womensagenda.com.au /subscribe, and we'll be in your inboxes just before lunch, and it's absolutely free. Thank you.
That's a wrap for Talk It Out, the Women's Agenda podcast, powered by Eagle Waves Radio. Don't forget to like us on Facebook, follow us on Twitter, and jump on the website for more amazing shows. Catch you next time.